Good evening. I'm Chief Meteorologist Alan Seals in Mobile, Alabama. You know springtime is severe weather season, and this is called Spring Storm Web Stream. Even though I'm in Mobile, Alabama, I'm going to be joined tonight by 5 chief meteorologists at my sister stations, all part of the Nexstar network, and that's because from Louisiana to Mississippi to Alabama and into Georgia, tomorrow and tomorrow night, we're looking at the threat of severe weather. And you know it is severe weather season. This is the sort of damage we have seen already this season from around the area. Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, all with severe weather. Isolated reports, sometimes tornadoes, sometimes hail, sometimes straight line wind damage, and also the threat of flooding. Now, tornadoes is what everyone focuses on, but when we talk about severe storms, it doesn't always mean tornadoes. What it does mean is you've got to be prepared and follow what's going on in your community. So we're going to start this evening going to Monroe, Louisiana, and this is basically because the storm is coming in from the west. So Chief Meteorologist Jared Floyd, what are you telling your people in Monroe about what they need to be prepared for tomorrow?
Well, first off, good evening, Alan. Thanks for having us this evening. But the focus right now for most of our area is not only the severe weather threat that is unfolding across the region tomorrow, but also the flash flooding and river flooding threat, which has become an increased concern, especially after the 6 to 8 inches of rain we saw with this past storm system, and also with the possibility of additional severe weather. So I did throw some graphics together so we could take a look at some of these together. I did want to show our future tracker model, which does show some of the unique severe weather setups for our area through the day tomorrow. We'll have kind of a decaying line of thunderstorms from our west in the enhanced risk severe weather area for today, moving in during the morning hours, but we do expect to hit a little bit of a lull during the morning as the atmosphere cools and stabilizes and some of the earlier storms kind of die off. But as they move eastward with daytime heating, that's where we expect to see that line of thunderstorms that kind of begins the severe weather threat for the day as it moves into our eastern counties and parishes, and then eventually across the Mississippi River by later on in the afternoon. So a little bit of good news there, but the downside to us is we kind of get the beginnings of a lot of the activity as it moves through our area tomorrow. Also wanted to throw out, obviously you probably see a lot of this from a lot of our meteorologists, but again, since the severe weather threat starts in our area, we kind of start with that slight risk off to our west, and then the enhanced risk that you've probably heard a lot about today across much of the southeast, the lower Mississippi Valley and the like, where damaging winds and the possibility of tornadoes increases through the day. But I also wanted to show this and throw this out there for a lot of our folks that are watching in the lower Mississippi Valley. An additional 1 to 3 inches of rain, locally higher amounts of 3.5 to 4 inches of rain, could obviously lead to some more headaches, and that's prompted a flash flood watch that is now included across much of North Louisiana and South Arkansas through Thursday evening. So again, 2 or 3 inches of rain across the Ouachita River Basin is not necessarily good news considering where we've spent most of the flood season already. So you tack on that with our river levels currently at the Ouachita River in Monroe, we are approaching major flood stage. And for those that aren't familiar, here in Monroe, that means the seawall goes up along the Ouachita River at 45 feet. And we'll wait and hear more instructions this weekend as to what the Tensas Levee District decides to do with that. But basically here closer to home, there is the severe weather threat, which is kind of conditional here in northeast Louisiana and southeast Arkansas. But the heavy rain threat obviously leads to other issues. And a side note to that very quickly, before I send it back to you, Alan, is the fact that with the soggy root systems in place, another 30 to 35 mile an hour wind gusts could be enough to uproot trees. I learned that from experience at my own home this past weekend. We had a 35 mile an hour wind gust drop a tree on our roof at our house. So again, that just goes to show that severe weather doesn't discriminate against anyone, no matter your profession. So we're definitely ready for more severe weather potential and heavy rainfall tomorrow.
All right, Jared, thanks for that perspective. And Jared made a good point that it could be anybody, and even a little wind gust when you have a lot of rain makes a big difference. Now, thunderstorms are starting to develop across central Texas. Already severe thunderstorm watches issued in that part of the country. It doesn't look like much right now, but it will be moving across our entire area as we go from tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow night. So now we'll go to Lafayette, Louisiana, and here we're going to check in with Heath Morton. Sorry, Heath, about that. You're ready. I see the bright colors on the map. Please explain what those colors mean, because sometimes people are confused about different levels of an outlook.
That's right, Alan. Thanks so much. And yes, we are under the enhanced risk tomorrow. That is the orange area. We try to tell everyone that is a level 3 risk. Kind of in the middle of the road, but higher in risk. We usually see the marginal to slight risks, and this covers all of our area, Lake Charles, all the way over to Lafayette into Baton Rouge. So we were also under this risk across many areas on Saturday. And of course, Saturday we didn't see a whole lot. Most of that stayed across the northern parts of the state. And the day before, a lot of the high resolution models weren't showing much at all. And I was wondering if we were going to see anything develop. I was thinking that we may not see a whole lot, mainly because of we had an inversion in the atmosphere. Layer of air a little warmer, about 5,000 feet up. We just couldn't break that. And we had a few storms, but really nothing severe. But tomorrow, it does look as though a lot of those high resolution models are showing those showers and thunderstorms that will develop and make their way off to the east. And still, it does look as though mid-morning to about mid-afternoon. The big key, too, is going to see how much we see in the morning hours. We see a big blow-up of storms in the early morning hours. That may limit some of the stuff in the afternoon, but it does look as though that window is going to be about a 6-hour window for us for severe thunderstorms or possible tornadoes. The enhanced risk, numerous to severe thunderstorms, and more persistent and widespread than the level 2 risk. Few tornadoes can be intense. And that is something we'll be watching, as this setup is a little more favorable for tornadoes simply because of the winds in the atmosphere are going to be changing direction with height. We're looking here at the winds out of the south-southeast tomorrow. That's going to play a key in what we have going on. As we go up in the atmosphere, we have those winds coming out of the west-southwest at about 50 to 60 miles per hour. So you have that changing with direction as we go up in the atmosphere, and that's why we have a lot of wind shear in the atmosphere, and with the instability combined, and that's why we have the tornado threat into the afternoon, getting really windy. South winds at 20 to 30 miles per hour. Now on Saturday, we didn't have a lot of severe weather, but we still had trees blown down, and we had some wind damage just from winds from the storm system itself, not from thunderstorms. And we could see that again as we head through, it looks like, late tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening. Winds switch to the southwest as we go through tomorrow night, so late tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow night. So that will really limit the tornado risk, and I think that risk pushes well east of us as we get through the afternoon. But here's what it looks like with our tornado threat index. As you can see here, about at 1:30 in the afternoon, a lot of that starts shifting east of Acadiana over toward Baton Rouge. But as we back this up a little bit, this is the key we're looking at. This kind of gives us an idea of wind shear in the atmosphere and instability. And when you have a good balance, you have a better chance of tornadoes. And you can see there the main time about noon, then that shifts east of us, and then eventually pushes over into southern parts of Alabama and over into the Florida Panhandle. But that's what we're looking at. We'll take a look right here real quick at what the future track shows. I'm really liking the way this looks because it doesn't show a lot of widespread severe weather tomorrow here, and that's one model. Then we'll quickly take a look at the HRR model, which is usually pretty good. These are the high resolution models that are pretty good about a day out, and as you can see there, it does have a big blow up of thunderstorms at the noon hour. We'll be watching that time frame for the possible tornadoes, but if we see everything blow up at once, that may kind of stabilize the atmosphere some, so that could be a good thing going into the afternoon. Back to you, Alan.
Thanks, Heath. I hear a lot of the phrases I used about conditional, risk, possibilities, model, and this is what all of us as meteorologists do. We look at the data that's in front of us, we digest it, we try to synthesize it and give you the best projection that we could find. And keep in mind, the data will be changing every 3 hours or even more frequently, depending upon when the computer models are updating. So now, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Chief Meteorologist Jesse Gunkel. Heath just said he was a little more optimistic. What are your thoughts overall for what your folks are looking at in your area?
Yeah, again, overall, thanks, Alan, again, for letting us join the conversation. What they're looking at is, obviously, big picture. We were talking to the local reporting office over in Slidell, and they're going to be releasing a balloon a little bit later on this evening, hopefully to get some good information out of it. Their concern is they may even up it to a moderate risk heading into tomorrow, because it does look like some areas across portions of our viewing area, at least, that we could see those storms rapidly intensify. It all, again, depends depends on those early storms what really happens. Do we get those supercell structures, or again with some heavy rainfall out there kind of choking and really just like the last round of storms that we had kind of washed out those storms before that next round, that main line drove through, and therefore we only saw some moderate rainfall across the area. But as you see here, our entire viewing area sits underneath that enhanced risk right now, and it looks like we're going to start to see some of those early storms probably just after lunchtime now. It looks like sometime around noon, maybe 1 o'clock. That's when we're going to see a few isolated thunderstorms up in Poincare Parish, up into the Felicianas, and even into southern Mississippi at that point. Also, again, I just want to point out that we are looking at a 3 out of 5. However, they may up it to a 4 out of 5. That's why we're kind of watching some of the latest model runs very closely to see exactly what happens. Obviously, we've got the wind shear out there. We've got all that low-level moisture kind of moving in over the next couple hours tonight, tomorrow, a little bit breezy out there. But I still think for us, it's going to start out with some isolated thunderstorms. We're talking during the afternoon hours, and then it ups to that squall line. Again, it depends in that line if we do see some, again, some possible rotating cells in that line. But most of that should breeze through here by the time we get into the early evening hours. I do want to point out, and again, we haven't shown this quite yet, but we fall underneath that black hatching area, and that's for our entire view area. That's pretty rare for southeastern Louisiana, especially for Baton Rouge. The entire viewing area, the last time that happened was 2016, and that's when we had multiple tornadoes across the area. Possible, maybe, again, it's not exactly the same scenario because then we did have a moderate risk, but again, if that happens and we start to move into that category, yes, there is that potential that we could be seeing a lot of strong thunderstorms out there heading into the afternoon hours of tomorrow. Obviously, we got those severe thunderstorm watches really popping up across portions of Texas, the Panhandle, and Oklahoma. What I do want to point out is, for us, again, our Doppler radar is still dry at this point, but we're keeping an eye on that system as it continues to dig its way down into the Gulf Coast. And then we're going to look for that first wave to come through and then eventually push through. We're also going to keep an eye, obviously, on the amount of rainfall. We've had a lot recently over the past couple of weeks here, and a lot of our river levels are a little bit high. Yes, we're concerned about another inch to even 3 inches in some spots. Locally, we could even see more than that, and that obviously leads to some flash flooding concerns across much of the region, especially just to the east of I-55. But timing for us, we'll start out with a few isolated thunderstorms, and obviously the latest run now kind of pushing it through the Baton Rouge area sometime late afternoon at this point. So again, that could change, obviously shift up an hour or two, but for us, we kind of look like we're going to be under the gun by late afternoon.
All right, Jesse, thanks for that perspective. And I know some people were looking at that map behind Jesse and saying, well, it looks like it's getting into Mississippi. And even though I'm here in Mobile, where we have a beautiful late evening, good looking sunset, that will be changing. But for us here in News 5 in Mobile, we actually do cover Jackson County, Mississippi. And it was just Saturday night going into Sunday where that part of our area did see a tornado, an EF1 tornado confirmed near Escatawpa. It did damage to a handful of homes. Now, for us, that's a typical strength of a tornado. Now, typical sounds something gentle, but for us, an EF1 definitely beats an EF2, 3, or 4. Along our coastline, we do get those brief tornadoes. Now, it stayed on the ground for less than a mile. And out of our whole evening, fortunately, in the News 5 area, that was the only tornado we had. I'm constantly reminding people, have a plan in advance. And one of the worst things that happens is when we're in the middle of severe weather coverage, a severe weather situation, and I get a call from someone who's in a mobile home saying, well, what do I do now? Now is the time to start planning. A weather radio, your free weather app, and of course watching your favorite meteorologist on TV, your favorite station for the latest information. So now, Jackson, Mississippi, it's a city, a community that gets a high number of tornado watches. We know it gets a lot of severe weather as we watch it closely when storms are coming toward Mobile. Ken South, your perspective on this overall situation for where you are.
All right, thank you, Alan, for letting us join in on the conversation as well. You're right, Mississippi is right in the middle of Dixie Alley, and certainly we had a significant severe weather outbreak this past weekend. You mentioned the tornado down around the Gulf Coast. That was one of 19 tornado touchdowns in the state of Mississippi. That actually put us in the top 10 number of tornado outbreaks ever in the state of Mississippi. Obviously, we are hoping that that does not repeat itself with this next storm, but but we're going to be prepared for some severe weather. Actually, we're telling our viewers in Mississippi this severe weather event has really already started. If you look back off to the west of us, we've got our front lined up here from the Midwest into the Central Plains, and already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 severe thunderstorm watch boxes. We expect more of that as the storm continues to march toward Louisiana, Mississippi, and eventually into Alabama for Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, and going into early Friday morning. So in Mississippi, while this storm is approaching, the atmosphere is really getting primed for this event. Dew points have been surging over the past several hours, and right now we're looking at dew points in the lower 60s across central and south Mississippi. Those numbers actually could go up even more as this storm approaches. Of course, the dew point is a direct measurement of the amount of moisture in the air. The higher the dew point, the more moisture that's in the air, the more unstable the atmosphere is. And I'm afraid that this storm, for a good portion of Mississippi, will be coming in during the afternoon hours, during the maximum heating of the day, when dew points will be allowed to be even higher. So that's something that we're going to be watching closely as we go through the next several hours. Speaking of which, here's a look at the timing of the storms here in Mississippi, and we're looking at a good, what we call a squall line developing back off to the west of us during the morning hours in Louisiana, but then crossing into our area, crossing the Mississippi River right around the lunch hour. So this part of Mississippi, let's say east of Interstate 55 towards the Pine Belt area, I-59, could be destabilizing a little bit more in the afternoon hours as this line approaches, and the back edge of this, we don't think that'll be coming through until very late in the afternoon, through the afternoon commute into the evening hours. We think that'll be making its way into Alabama once we get past midnight for tomorrow night. But some of the other meteorologists have already talked about the risk level. Well, in Mississippi and over parts of Alabama, the risk is highest here. It's a level 3 on a scale of 0 to 5. That's an enhanced risk, and that includes our entire viewing area from the Delta down through the Metro and into the Hattiesburg and the Laurel area. So this is what we are expecting with those squall lines. Even though this is expected to be a progressive system moving in and out fairly quickly within a matter of hours, the rain could be so heavy that we could still pick up 1 to 3 inches of rainfall. Now, we are experiencing still some flooding in the Mississippi Delta, some backwater flooding because the Mississippi River is so high. So that could pose some flash flooding problems, especially for that area of the state. Of course, other areas with traditionally poor drainage could also go underwater. Along the leading edge of that squall line, 60, 70 mile per hour winds. We could also see quarter to maybe up to golf ball sized hail. And of course, we're looking for embedded tornadoes within those squall lines, and we're hoping we don't see any strong tornadoes out ahead of that main line of storms. So, Alan, we're going to be ready for everything as this system makes its way towards us by Thursday afternoon.
All right. Thank you, Chief Meteorologist Ken South. We'll check back with you in just a moment. And as we transition to our last stop in northern Alabama, keep in mind this year, like almost every severe weather season, things increase during the springtime. You get tornadoes. Sometimes you get tornado outbreaks. It was 8 years ago that Alabama had a deadly tornado outbreak of long-track tornadoes that killed hundreds of people. In most cases, though, severe weather is not that intense, but it only takes one tree on one house, your house, for it to be a big deal. So now we're going to go to CBS 42 in Birmingham, Alabama. And Chief Meteorologist Ashley Gann, you're watching this carefully because Birmingham, no stranger to severe weather.
Absolutely right, Alan. Thanks so much for having us as a part of the conversation this evening. And I tell you what, as you mentioned before, historically mid to late April, especially here in central and north Alabama, we have seen some of our most deadly tornadoes form during this time of year. This is peak season for severe weather here, and this is our primary severe weather season with tornado producing thunderstorms. So we don't take any severe threat lightly here, and I know a lot of folks are watching closely to see how these storms are going to materialize over the next several days. All right, let's start talking about this enhanced threat, and that's what a lot of folks have been referencing tonight, the meteorologists across the Deep South. So for Alabamians, especially central and north Alabama, this threat is going to include the time frame from 4 p.m. tomorrow through Friday early morning. And as I remind folks, these early morning storms can also pose a bit of a bigger danger, and that's that we're sleeping. So make sure you have that weather radio and that you know what's going on with the weather before you go to bed. I'll kind of march through some of those checklist items here in just a moment, but let's talk about the weather forecast first. So you'll notice that our viewing area is kind of split into two colors here. We've got yellow in the eastern half, pretty much orange for all of central and west Alabama. That's a slight to enhanced risk. So enhanced risk just means we could see more numerous thunderstorms, and each one of those thunderstorms could carry with it the opportunity for a tornado to develop. We'll see more isolated thunderstorms in East Alabama. That slight risk on a scale of 1 to 5. It's a 2 of 5. Can never rule out an isolated tornado either. As we move through the early morning hours, though, temperatures are going to be balmy. We'll be back near mid to upper 70s even by your lunch hour. But for central Alabama, it stays quiet to start your Thursday, even through the early afternoon. So again, I don't want people to let their guard down. We've been talking about Thursday all week, a weather aware for Thursday, but it's really for the afternoon and evening hours. This is not going to be a morning event for central Alabama. By 3 p.m., we will be watching that radar closely, as our friends back in Mississippi will already be dealing with a good deal of storms, and so we'll be watching to see how those severe threats materialize. By 5 p.m., knocking on our back door, and actually this is some new model data. We have the Barron model here, in-house model, and it actually has it backing off just about maybe 30 minutes to an hour there. Not a big deal, but just from our forecast earlier in the newscast. By 7 p.m., though, what I'm noticing is this developing squall line from basically North Alabama all the way down through Tuscaloosa, stretching back towards Meridian, Mississippi. This is going to be a bit of a cause for concern in my eyes, and this is going to race across central part of the state. I like what Chief Meteorologist Ken South said. He said these storms are very progressive, and that's exactly what we're going to see. They're going to move in quickly, but they could be causing quite a bit of a rumble. Notice that they're elongated more north-south. This is much like we saw late Saturday night and early Sunday morning. A wind threat, especially on the leading edge. But when these storms become more cellular in nature, that's when we could see the potential of these rotating. Again, we've been talking a lot about some of the science behind it, the shear involved, the warm air, the wet air. I won't repeat all of that, but those are all parameters that still apply here in central Alabama. The timeline for East Alabama will be from 11 p.m. Thursday night until the wee hours on Friday morning. I think by 2 a.m., the storms will be back in Georgia and things quiet down. One thing to note, though, temperatures are going to be getting much colder. So after the storms move out, we could be looking at some very cool air for your Good Friday and as we head into your Easter weekend. Alan?
Thanks, Ashley. And of course, we'll talk in just a couple of minutes, but I want to make sure folks who are typically watching me here at News 5 know what we are looking for. And as always, from all the meteorologists you have heard, no matter where you are, watch your trusted source, whether it's on TV or online. So here at News 5 in the Mobile area, we will easily get a couple inches of rain by the time it moves out going into Friday. Several inches of rain possible. The heaviest amounts are going to be in southern Mississippi. And our day will start much as Saturday did. Cloudy, a few showers. It'll be a breezy, windy afternoon. And then the active weather that you heard all the other meteorologists talk about moving through Louisiana and Mississippi. It will arrive tomorrow evening as scattered thunderstorms, and they will be moving steadily. The computer models, they all give you a clock and a time, but remember, weather is not digital. The point is basically this time tomorrow night, we're likely to see those strong thunderstorms splitting our area, moving steadily to the east. And even though the model doesn't show a lot of widespread rain and thunderstorms, there still is going to be a bunch of rain. The potential for isolated thunderstorms. No matter where you are, a couple of points to remember. If you were not impacted in the last severe weather situation, it does not mean you will not be impacted in the upcoming situation. And if you were impacted in the last situation, it doesn't necessarily mean you will be. So as always, we take it hour by hour. But you know, earlier this spring, eastern Alabama hit hard by tornadoes. Governor Kay Ivey of Alabama did request a major disaster declaration from President Trump. That declaration has been approved. It covers nearly a dozen counties in Alabama. It's all about getting federal funding to try to get things cleaned up. And it's a situation we see often, just like we see when a strong storm comes in. Sometimes you'll hear state emergency, which doesn't always mean that it's going to be an emergency, but it's all about preparing. There you see those Alabama counties under the, they're designated as disaster declaration counties. So again, it's all about funding that can go from FEMA to the emergency management agencies and make sure folks can try to get their lives back together. Something that we don't want to see but something that is inevitable. One of the unique things about Alabama when it comes to severe weather, if you go back since the 1950s, the state of Alabama has had more tornado fatalities than Texas, than Louisiana, than Oklahoma. And you would think, how could that be? Because they have the stronger storms there. But we have some vulnerable communities, a lot of folks in mobile homes. So back to Birmingham, Ashley Gann, what are you telling people? Do they seem to understand what these threats are when we get into severe weather?
Yeah, and I think that we have a very educated community as far as severe weather goes. And one of the things that we always tell folks, download our app. Any station that I'm sure kind of reinforces this messaging. Also, have that NOAA weather radio ready. That's something else that a lot of viewers are known to do. And especially for us with overnight storms, it's so imperative to have that NOAA weather radio because that could be your first line of defense. And also, it may seem like common sense or simple, but chat with friends and family tonight and tomorrow. Make sure that you know where your friends and family are, and make sure you know that they have a plan, and likewise make sure they're just aware that weather could be impacting their area. Again, I know it may seem simple, but sometimes a simple phone call could really save a life. And I really do think that folks here rally together. I have a neat story, Alan. Just last Sunday, we had storm shelters that were opening right when the tornado watches were issued. We had a live shot in Vance, Alabama. That's in Tuscaloosa County. We started out doing some coverage there. There were 2 people inside that storm shelter during the tornado watch. There was a warning issued for Tuscaloosa County, including the city of Vance. The numbers swelled to 200 people. There's now a confirmed tornado that hit that area, and fortunately over 200 lives were saved because of some of that federal funding that went to build that storm shelter right there in Vance.
And obviously in your community, having gone through the devastating and deadly tornadoes 8 years ago, people are a little more aware, but as aware as people are, I think in every community there are myths and misconceptions about severe weather. Are there any in particular that stand out to you for northern Alabama?
Well, yeah, and actually one that I want to point out from last weekend as well is just because of the strength of the storm does not designate size or width. I want to show you this example. This is just a section of some of the tornadoes we had last week. There were 8. That's all I could fit on the screen. We actually had up to 14, but this was one. It's an EF0 tornado. It hit the Highland Lakes community in Shelby County. The length of that tornado was nearly 6.5 miles long, and the width was over 600 yards wide. That is large, but keep in mind that the wind speeds really never topped 80 miles per hour. So just because of the length and the width does not necessarily mean it's a weak, it doesn't designate a strong or a weak storm. So there's definitely some different sizes and shapes these tornadoes can take. So I want people to know that. I also want people to know just because you live in a mountainous area does not prevent that. Highland Lake sits on top of what we consider Double Oak Mountain. It's a secondary mountain chain here in central Alabama in the Birmingham metro. And some people feel like, oh, I live over the mountain, I'm safe from storms. They don't form on the mountain. Au contraire, we witnessed that firsthand with just this last Sunday's set of storms that moved through. Alan?
And thanks again, Chief Meteorologist Ashley Gann. Severe weather season, again, tornadoes, that's the picture you get in your brain. Another interesting statistic. On average, in the United States, you get 1,300 tornadoes every year. And out of those 1,300, it's typically fewer than a couple dozen that actually kill people. And it turns out the ones that lead to death and destruction, those are the ones you hear about. You don't hear about the other 1,280. And that's all to say that we could see tornadoes from this, but it doesn't mean they're all going to be damaging and devastating tornadoes. So now, Jackson, Mississippi, we're going to check back in with Ken South. Ken, I tell you all the time, I watch your location for a clue of what's coming to my part of the Gulf Coast. Do you think that your people are actually fatigued of severe weather and hearing about the threat of severe weather?
Yeah, they can be, because we often have these severe weather events during the peak of our severe weather season, which is in the month of April. So we talk about this a lot heading through the month of March, through the month of April, and we have gotten these storms coming through on a regular basis. We just had a significant severe weather event this past weekend. Take a look at this map. We had 19 confirmed tornadoes touch down in the state of Mississippi, mostly this past Saturday night. That did extend into early Sunday morning over the very eastern part of the state. And you're right, most of these were not killer tornadoes. Unfortunately, there was one exception. The strongest tornado right there, Hamilton in Monroe County, had 130-mile-per-hour winds. There was one fatality, 19 injuries. The rest of these just produced property damage, but we had a couple of very hard-hit areas. Clark County in East Mississippi, just to the northwest of where you are in Mobile, they had 3 tornado touchdowns. Also, we had 3 tornado touchdowns in Warren County, including 2 within the city limits of Vicksburg. So 19 confirmed tornadoes in one event. That's significant. In fact, it is top 10 in our tornado outbreaks in the state of Mississippi. Number 1 was from Hurricane Rita. We had 44 tornado touchdowns from one event. Number 2 was April, once again in the peak of tornado season, severe weather season. That was in 2011. But we ranked this past weekend was number 9 on that list. And you can see here that the number of tornadoes does usually go up on average as we go through the late winter and into the spring months, with April being that peak of the severe weather season. Ashley made a couple of really good points, is that you really should have a NOAA weather radio, a battery-powered NOAA weather radio at this time of the year, because a lot of our tornadoes in the southeast are nocturnal or nighttime tornadoes. You may be asleep when they're coming through. So if a tornado warning is issued for your area, you need something that is going to wake you up in case that happens. Also, tornadoes can hit just about anywhere, and you may get more than one over the same area, as evidence from this past weekend. Alan?
And then, Ken, speak a little bit to the fact that you and I, all broadcast meteorologists, have a great support system called the National Weather Service. I know you have one in your office, the folks who actually issue the warnings and watches. The partnership between us and them, how does that come into play for even a situation like this?
Yeah, well, we can always call the National Weather Service anytime. I've probably spoken to them 2 or 3 times during the day today, and we're also in constant communication with our local National Weather Service office during severe weather events. That certainly was the case this past weekend. We have a chat set up, so we can always talk to them at any time, and of course, they'll be available for that with this next severe weather event coming tomorrow.
As always is the case. So thanks a lot there, Ken. I appreciate it. You just saw, I guess, a typical scene of what you expect when you hear severe weather, which is wind damage, trees down, but severe weather could be hail. Technically, it's not flooding, but we could still see flooding. Of course, lightning from any thunderstorm. And in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Jesse, now, you've got this big river nearby. Are there any myths about the river and severe weather?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in just a second, Alan. Obviously, we've been dealing with flood concerns for at least the last month and a half along the Mississippi River. We've been very close to even record flooding on the Mississippi. Luckily for us, we have a big thing called a levee here in the Baton Rouge area, and that's been keeping a lot of that water away. And obviously, we haven't had to deal with multiple rounds of rain across the area to kind of add up on top of that, but we've had a lot of rain in surrounding areas that have been causing a lot of issues, and potentially, again, if we get another 1 to 3 inches, locally up to 5, yeah, it's more of our other areas. 2016, along with the same year that we had our tornado outbreak here, which is obviously very rare for southeast Louisiana. Chance for heavy rainfall. That was the same year that we had 30 inches or 36 inches of rainfall in a matter of a day and a half. That's where we had all that widespread flooding. The area and the concern was for a lot of our smaller rivers. Again, the Amite, the Comite, the Tchefuncte, a lot of these rivers in between where all that water filtered into, and they quickly exploded and really just went over their banks and flooded a lot of areas. And it took a while for that water to recede and eventually move downstream, because the concern here is not all that water goes into the Mississippi River. It actually goes back out into the lakes, our tidal lakes, so like Maurepas and Lake Pontchartrain here, and moves out into the Gulf of Mexico before even going back into the Mississippi at this point. So flash flooding is definitely a concern. Now, I do want to point out, because of the tornado threat tomorrow and the chance for those very strong, high straight line winds, well, A lot of areas around here have already closed school. Again, a lot of government institutions have already canceled across the area. And the best thing is you can go to our website, brproud.com, for a complete listing at this point. But as you see here on the Mississippi River, we've been in that major category for quite some time, and it doesn't look like much. We're going to drop back to that moderate category, possibly going into the weekend. It all depends, obviously, on all the rain a little bit further upstream. But it's going to bounce back, forth, stay in that major category. And really, we're not going to get back to minor or even action stage possibly for another month. We've been in that major flood category for over 100 days at this point. So here you go, watching your Futurecast, just to give you some estimates out here. This is one model RPM. It's obviously going a little bit lower, and let's just hope for this scenario across our region, because obviously we don't need much in the way of rainfall. Alan?
So Jesse, you're obviously dealing with two scenarios here. One is an immediate threat of severe weather, and one is a lingering threat of river levels and river flooding. Are you finding that they're able to distinguish between the two of them? Because you have flash floods, you have river floods.
Yeah, I try to split it up a lot of times too, just to kind of give them an indication. Like, again, flash flooding means immediate. This is when you need to take that concern. And obviously, we got to worry about long-term flooding. We kind of go with more updates and show the river levels on a lot of areas, because for a lot of people here, their houses are up on stilts and they live very close. They have camps in a lot of areas where they just can't get to that often. So they have to worry about what's going on in some of these smaller rivers. We got bayous here. Again, if you don't know what that is a swamp. And these swamps, a lot of times, will take in a lot of water. However, again, it doesn't go away that often, that water. So here you go. You got heavy rainfall, and that's usually our biggest problem at this point. So we're going to watch more on that, and obviously the tornado threat a little bit down the road. Alan?
All right, I appreciate it. Chief Meteorologist Jesse Gunkel. Our weather here in Mobile, I tell my viewers that it's a very similar setup to what we had on Saturday, but similar does not mean identical. One thing that sort of works in the benefit here is by the time the storm system gets to our part of the Gulf Coast, the sun will be lower in the sky, so it's one less source of fuel, the warm ground. Not that that's the only source. This system, it has its own strength. It is springtime. So we get into springtime severe weather, and we'll go now to Heath Morton. He's in Lafayette, and Heath, can you compare this to past weather events for the purpose of your viewers, and should you compare it to past events?
I think you can compare it to some events, because I think they all work differently. You know, around here, sometimes the big high-end events, like last week, we thought we'd see more in the way of severe weather on paper. It looked pretty impressive. Back in 2012, Christmas Day, we had an impressive looking, what looked like an event that's going to come in, and we didn't see anything, luckily, during that event. But it does look as though with this event, everything is there, so we're going to have to watch it very closely, but it does look as though we're going to have to watch to see what we see during the middle of the days. We see those showers and thunderstorms go up. Now, that may limit the instability a little bit if they go up early. And another thing, too, is we have to watch out for flash flooding. I want to remind everyone to download our weather app. You can download that. And it is free. Go to the App Store and you can get alerts on that. Very beneficial to have, especially this time of year. One thing I want to say is, like I was saying earlier, these events are a little different from other past events. It does kind of remind me of an event that we had a few years ago. We did have severe weather, but we had a little more heavy rain. So we have to watch out for that. Now, I'm not really playing up the heavy rain event, but we'll look at that RPM model in just a second. But also, tornado watch conditions are favorable for tornadoes. I want everybody to know a difference between a watch and a warning. Warning means radar indicated, and terrain spotter has indicated that, or it's by radar. And then a severe thunderstorm watch, we're looking at conditions are favorable. Severe thunderstorm warning has been indicated by radar or an actual spotter.
Yeah, excellent basic information there. And you, like the rest of us, we have weather apps, which a lot of folks are using. Are you finding concerns where people are either misinterpreting what the weather app is showing or looking at it literally as the only possibility?
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at it literally as an only possibility, and the problem is they interpret, they're going to, you know, what it says, they're they think that's what's going to happen. And that's why it's good to watch us and to pay attention to what we're saying, because we can give the fine details of what could happen. And it does look as though we do have that threat tomorrow, so we'll be on at 10 o'clock. Watch us. We'll be giving updates tonight and tomorrow, specific updates. Everything changes, hour by hour, every couple of hours, so it's good, instead of just looking at the app, to pay attention to what we're saying as well. And I also wanted to show that the RPM model, like Jesse was saying, not showing a whole lot, but I have seen past events that didn't look impressive with the heavy rain. Then we see some flash flooding, so we always have to throw that in the mix in South Louisiana. Any event around here has the possibility of producing flash flooding, so that's one thing that we'll be watching for tomorrow, but on average maybe half an inch to an inch of rain.
All right, Heath Morton, Chief Meteorologist in Lafayette, Louisiana. Thanks for the insight. I joke about it, but the truth is, if weather apps were perfect, meteorologists would not have jobs. They're not. They're really guides to give you a sense of what can happen, what can go on. But the strength of weather apps is no matter where you are, you get instant alerts, you can see the radar, and you get those warnings that tell you when there is a threat on your way. So, Monroe, Louisiana, we go back now to Jared Floyd. You're ready. Is your area ready?
Well, they better be at this point, after the alerts that we kind of handed out to folks over the past weekend. We really kind of nailed down that severe weather threat over the weekend and really had folks on alert, and that was the most important part. Now, I do have one graphic that I wanted to kind of bring up to folks on how to prepare in our local area. The big focus for right now is to clean out your drainage areas and ditches, any kind of tree branches, especially from this past storm that's moved through, can clog those drainage areas. And especially in this part of the world, in this part of the country, we drain rather poorly, and we're basically situated in multiple river valleys. So if you're out and about, maybe you have a few extra hours this evening, or maybe some extra hours tomorrow morning, maybe very early in some spots, but try to clean those out and make sure that the water has somewhere to go. Multiple ways of receiving severe weather alerts. You've heard multiple meteorologists say that, so you better listen to all of us. And review your safety plan. Know where to go if a warning is issued in your area, and also you can download our KTV EKARD app. Fun fact, Alan, we have our own live weather Doppler radar here in the Monroe area, which actually falls into a radar hole. Our highest populated parish is Ouachita Parish in Monroe, West Monroe, and our lowest scans from National Weather Service radars are typically about 9,200 feet, which doesn't indicate what's happening at the ground level, like a tornado. So we've cut those scans with our newest radar that's been up and going for the last year down to about 200, 300 feet. And so that obviously makes a world of difference when it comes to surface-based thunderstorms and what's happening at the ground level. You can take that radar information wherever you go if you download our app. So I know we've been talking about apps and how important they are, but they truly are a revolutionary way of receiving those severe weather alerts. Alan?
And yes, you're right. Another tool to get additional information. Tornadoes again, straight line wind. Is there a difference in the impact?
In our area, not really. In fact, in many instances, our severe thunderstorm wind gusts can top out 75, 80, 85 mile an hour winds. In fact, our last 3 thunderstorm related fatalities in this area were from straight line winds. We haven't had a tornado fatality in the Arklamas region in our area since 2004. Hopefully we don't break that streak tomorrow, but that just goes to show that those straight line wind gusts, 75, 80 mile an hour wind gusts, are stronger than Category 1 hurricanes and stronger than some of our weakest tornadoes. And so if a severe thunderstorm warning is issued for your area, you should treat it the same as a tornado warning. Interior portion of your home, away from windows and doors, and putting as many walls between you and the outside as possible. And that's the easiest way to stay safe in all these severe weather events. Alan?
All right, Chief Meteorologist Jared Floyd. I love the comparison to tropical weather. A severe thunderstorm can be stronger than a hurricane, at least in one location. So it's all about being prepared. You've heard from my fellow chief meteorologists across the Nexstar station across the southeast. Severe weather is very likely tomorrow, moving from west to east across this part of the country. You've got to have a plan. You've got to make sure your family and your pets and everyone can get to the safe place or get out of danger's way. Make sure you have multiple ways to get weather information. If you live in a mobile home, you've got to have a plan before the weather gets there for where you are going to go and how you can get there. The worst thing you could possibly do is wait until the last minute. I try to be optimistic. Even in the worst weather situations, the majority of square miles in any given county are not directly impacted by that worst part. But there is always a very small area. And what's very common when you watch people on the news after severe weather, they say, I didn't think it was going to be that bad. Be prepared no matter what. I'm Chief Meteorologist Alan Seals. Have a great evening. Stay informed and stay safe.